with that, I would like to welcome my boss, the CEO of Miller Heiman Group. I worked with Byron for a number of years ago and again today, and every time I hear him speak, it's a true inspiration to me. I'm really proud he's made the journey, so let me hand over to Byron. Thank you.
No, every time. Good morning. Oh, clicker. Okay, as Richard said, we're going to do things a bit different today. Typically in these conferences, we talk all about kind of what's going on today in the world of selling and what all the different trends that are happening, all the things you should be thinking about. And you'll get some of that, but we really felt that it was time to pause and talk about what the future of sales may look like. And specifically, for me, over the next, looks like it says 45 minutes, we're going to talk about some of the things that we think will impact sales in the future and what the future may hold as it relates to our profession. Okay? Let me ask you a quick question to get this thing going. So when I say, or I ask you, what is the art of selling? If I were to ask you that question, right? And so individually, what do you think that means? So just kind of think about that for a second. Is that like knowing exactly when to ask that question, or how to handle an objection? All right, but just think about this. When I ask you what the art of selling is, what do you think? Now, if I were to ask you what is the science of selling, what do you think that is? And how is that different than the art? So just think about that for a second. Okay? Now, if I were to say, okay, listen, I've actually been asking this question for probably about 10 years or so, and I used to just say, is it an art or a science? And then the answer is, well, it's both, and people kind of figured that out, right? So now I kind of frame it out as, do you think that sales is more of an art, or is it more of a science? Okay? I don't have that app thing going on here, so we're going old school with the hands. So those of you that think sales is more of an art, raise your hand. Okay, that's pretty good. How about science? Okay, so all right, that's right. So we're looking probably at 15%, 10-15% said art and science. Now, you can imagine that trend's been moving the other direction, right? 5, 10 years ago, it was the complete opposite. Probably wouldn't surprise you. Imagine 30 years ago, 40 years ago in a room like this. Well, there wouldn't have been a room like this 30 or 40 years ago, all talking about sales. It just wouldn't have happened. But imagine that people would have thought we were crazy. It wouldn't have been a hand in the room that would have said it was science 30, 40 years ago. Today, the amount of science and selling is absolutely accelerating, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, to get things going, I want to talk about what we actually believe in. This is kind of our belief. We think that selling will always be part art and science. I don't care, 30 years from now, there probably won't be a hand that says it's art, but at the end of the day, there will always be an aspect of art in our profession, and you have to excel at both. That's what we believe to be true, and it's a fact. However, and this is the most important, the science of selling is accelerating, and it will require a new way of thinking and execution. And that's what we're going to talk about, is how the science of selling is accelerating and what that's actually going to mean in terms of how we think and how we execute. Okay, here is one of the things to get us started in the sense of where and how the science and specifically some technology will impact selling. This is the slide we all have to believe in, or the rest of what I'm going to talk about doesn't make sense. All right? So we've got this big research business called CSO Insights, and they go out and study sales organizations, and we do a lot of time and activity studies, right? So how much time are people actually spend selling versus doing other things? And you kind of roll that all up, and here's the data. And you could argue for some industries, it's a little bit more here and there, but directionally, we believe strongly that this is accurate. That at the end of the day, people are actually selling somewhere around 35%. They got travel going on, lots of meeting, administrative tasks, post-sale tasks, account management, lead gen stuff, all that kind of good stuff. And so there's kind of two categories we put everything in. There's something we call Tedium, and then ingenuity. So if you think about what salespeople do in terms of tedium, that's all the administrative tasks. And it doesn't always even mean administrative. It could be putting stuff in CRM. It could be mean I'm following up on questions that internal people have. One of the companies that we were talking to spend 7 to 12 hours a week, reps do just chasing down internal questions, whether that's from accounting or whether that's from finance or whether that's from marketing or whatever it might be. Could be putting, again, stuff in CRM. It could also be doing research on social media, right? It could be doing research on your potential prospects and that kind of good stuff. But at the end of the day, it's not the ingenuity of selling. It's not the actual really trying to understand their needs, designing solutions for customer and meeting their needs. So we think about all the tasks that sales do in 2 categories. Ingenuity, which again is the real selling. It's bringing the creativity and the innovation into your sales activity. And there's everything else, which is tedium. Now, today, we would all agree, if you just look at the numbers, there's more tedium than there is ingenuity in terms of how people react and behave. Tomorrow, we fundamentally believe that the tedium will go away. All right, now go away completely, we can argue how much, but I'm going to show you some examples today of technology and things that are happening today, that are available today, that already are starting to move that needle. Imagine 5 years from now, okay? So the question we have is, well, what if that actually does happen? Let's just pretend that happens. Let's just agree that there will be enough technology and new processes and new ways of thinking that will allow salespeople to sell 80% of the time. That's all they have time to do, is actually sell and be in front of customers and do things. Would that require potential change in your sales force and your people, in the way you behave? Right? I actually think it would, but that's what we suggest. And so that is, the rest of what I'm going to talk about is examples and why you're supposed to believe me that we're going to move tedium away. But second, what does the future salesperson potentially look like in that environment? Okay? All right. Now, if there was ever a time where sales needed disruption a bit, I think now is the time. All right? One of the trends that we're seeing, hands down, no question, is sales performance on aggregate is deteriorating. Okay? We've been studying the amount of reps that make quota for quite some time now, and from 2012 to today, we're seeing a decline in performance. This is the percent of reps that make quota. 63% in 2017, 53%. Now, again, all industries, and we can argue, oh, one industry is a little bit more than the other or whatever it might be, but we're talking thousands of organizations in here in a pretty standard set of results. Now, you might want to think about this as opposed to 100% of your reps making quota. You never want 100% of your reps making quota, ever. It means you got the wrong comp plan. So you really want around 66%, something like that. So 53% is not good. 63 actually wasn't so bad. But the point is, sales, it's, another way of looking at it, buyers are getting better at buying faster than sellers are getting better at selling. Okay? And we're seeing that trend happening quicker. And so if there's ever a time where some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about in a minute comes into play and impacts our environment around selling, I think now is the right time. Okay. Now, I talked about buyers getting better. There's a lot of things happening on the buyer side that's creating some disruption. Here's one of the things that I think is something for us to think about is these exchanges that are starting to happen. And maybe you've run into this, maybe you haven't yet. But one of the things is it's not just on the seller side where there's innovation happening in technology. It's actually happening on the buyer side as well. One situation is these procurement systems that folks use, right? Is they're actually starting to innovate creating exchanges. And so what that essentially means is all of your data related to purchasing, and so why a company bought from another, is starting to be up in the cloud and is starting to be able to get shared. And so I, as a procurement officer, I can subscribe into this, and I can start seeing other companies and why they made decisions to buy other things. And so now, like references and that kind of stuff become really, really easy. But what also happens is when you lose, the transparency of that now becomes more pervasive. And so those types of things become a bit more relevant and important. And so again, I'm not suggesting this is that pervasive right now. I think we're seeing a bit of this, but I think in 5 years, the transparency in terms of our wins and losses will be very well known. That's going to be something that down to individual people, reps that they work with and everything. So that's just something to consider. There's this company called Alibaba. You guys ever heard this? Right? I mean, this is like, their mission is frightening. I mean, it's like become the exchange for all sellers and buyers for B2B business. And they've built this. Everybody ever used it? Has everybody gone in and actually bought something or procured something from this thing? It's crazy. You have, right? I mean, the amount of analytics that they basically have, and for you to do price shopping, and it's crazy. But again, think of this as like it's a big online store, right? But you're buying B2B solutions. I mean, you can buy an entire telecom custom solution for multiple millions of dollars online. All right, and what it does is it has this amazing technology that sits there and gives you all the answers that you need, and it goes through features, and it connects you with different people online. But the point is, it's bringing it for the most part, it brings the salesperson out of the mix. All right, and so it's pretty disruptive, and it's growing pretty fast. And so again, if you just think about the point of buyers getting better, buying faster than sellers are getting seller, there's a lot of innovation happening on the buyer side that from a B2B standpoint, we got to continue to think through. Okay, but let's talk about the innovation happening on the seller side, all right, in particular, and where the science is really impacting training, technology, and talent, all right? Let's start with training. So I've kind of made the case that things are getting harder for or for sellers. Now, one of the things that's really driving that is the fact that there are more people involved in the sales process. There are more people on the seller side and more people involved in the buyer side. Just by the pure numbers, as we kind of study this stuff, we're just noticing more people involved. And there's more formal processes. When there's more people involved, there's more processes, all right? Maybe that's a procurement process, whatever it might be, but there's more processes. When there's more people, there's more processes. There's always going to be more politics, all right? There's just more to making those decisions. So what's happening now is the client expectations during the sales process is a lot more serious, right? There's just more expectations. You got to add value in the sales process, like during the sales process, not after you sell something. But during the sales process is when you got to start adding your value, which is different. And there's a lot of different ways of thinking about doing that, but that is a requirement now. It's not good enough just to show up and ask good questions. Not good enough anymore, right? Everyone does that. You got to show up, you got to ask good questions, you got to understand their needs, and you got to add value. So that's requiring a lot more innovation around training, but also of how you really approach your customer. There's a really good survey that I've shared a few times. Some of you may have seen this, that went out to 700 B2B buyers. And one simple question, which is, why did you choose the winner versus everybody else? What was the one factor that made the difference? And overwhelmingly, the number one thing was that individual seller educated me with new ideas or perspectives. It's the number one reason. I mean, understanding my needs were number 5. All right, 5 years ago, there would have been a totally different list. All right? So again, why am I saying all this? It's because there is this need, this more pressure to differentiate yourself in how you sell. That is important now. How you sell is a strategic asset for your business. All right? It's important. Okay? So if that's the case, what's required and what does that mean? Okay? So one of the things that we believe in is if you're really going to add value in the sales process, there's been a lot of gizmos and gimmicks and different approaches on this whole topic, but we think that two things have to come together. You have to be an expert in your client. You can't just show up and start telling them stuff. can't do it. You can't show up and start trying to educate them. You can't do it. You don't have any credibility, they're not going to believe you, even though what you say might be true. So you have to show up, and you have to be a deep expert in what they do and build credibility, number one. Number two, you have to be an expert in what you do. We're seeing, by the pure numbers, the amount of generalist sellers decline, right? Which kind of makes sense, because a generalist knows a whole bunch of stuff about a little bit, I know a little bit about a whole bunch of things. That's not getting you deep enough, okay? And that's not positioning you to really add value in the sales process. We're seeing an increase in specialists out there, which does make more sense. Doesn't mean that generalists are dead. There's a place for that, especially around account management. We could talk about that later. But the point is these two things have to come together, okay? So one of the things in the learning area is adaptive learning, in that instead of just saying, okay, there's certain things that everybody needs to understand and learn, like methodology things, like how you behave, what are the things you need to go do. But when it comes to actual skills required, that's an individual need. Historically, companies like ours and others would say, okay, everyone needs to get these skills. Everyone needs to get these skills. The reality is individuals have different needs, right? In terms of, is it about handling an objection, opening up a meeting, asking the right types of questions, negotiations, whatever it might be, it's based on individual needs. And so there's this big trend now, of which we're a big part of, in using data to understand specific needs of individuals and giving them the specific training that they need in smaller, bite-sized pieces, all right, to really develop them as actual individuals. So this idea of personalization in learning, which is actually called adaptive learning. So that's one thing that I think is going to be, it's a trend now. I think it's going to continue for a while. Let me talk about some technology that's highly disruptive. And I think it will be something that will be even more disruptive in the next couple of years. And that's really around artificial intelligence, specifically in the sales profession, all right? Now, to do this, I want to talk about a few different types of definitions around AI, just to make sure that we're saying the same thing, okay? It starts with good old-fashioned analytics. Good old-fashioned analytics requires a human being to develop insights from a set of data, all right? And that data is very structured. And then when you want to make enhancements to that analysis, you do it yourself as a human being. That is using a pivot table and Excel and cranking through data, okay? That's been around for a long time and is by far how most organizations, widely speaking, actually get insights through analytics, okay? Now, then there's this idea of big data, which everyone's chasing right now, and you hear a lot of, and that's a bit different. So now a human being actually develops the insights, but also technology is helping to do it as well, okay? There's actually business rules that are applied to the data that the human being actually develops, okay? And it's going after not just structured data, but a wide set of data in different places, all right? But when you want to make enhancements to those business rules, the human being actually needs to go in and change those business rules. If this, then that, okay? But, again, it's an improvement because you're going after a whole big set of data, and the business rules will help serve up some insights in which the human being sits there, listens to, doesn't listen to, kind of makes it their own and moves on. This big data thing's what kind of everything's going after right now, right? These next two areas is where a lot of the innovation's going. To start off with, there's kind of multiple levels of artificial intelligence. The first is called deep learning, kind of machine learning. And this is now where you're taking the human being out of the whole thing. So the technology actually now develops the insights. Okay, again, going from structured and unstructured data. But here's the deal. The technology sees patterns, okay, and then writes its own business rules and says, hey, I'm seeing this pattern. So if this happens, then this should go, then this insight, all right? And it evolves itself, okay? A further example of this general purpose AI, which you don't, so there are applications I'll talk about today that are doing this. this next one, which is really, this is stuff you think about when you watch movies and you hear a lot about artificial intelligence, where the thing's literally coding itself. All right, so all the same thing as deep learning, but now it's creating new code. This is where you'll see one computer play another computer in chess. They had this big competition about a year or so ago where they were playing capture the flag, and they had to, play each other, and so there was creating new code. That's great, but that doesn't really impact sales. So this may be there later. This is where the innovation is happening. In a sense, it's not really creating code, but it's creating rules, and it's seeing patterns. And based on patterns, it gets to know individuals who use a system and then understands how they behave, and then evolves patterns of business rules and insights based on that person. I'll give real examples here in a minute. Okay? So that's kind of the landscape, if you will. It's out there every day today. This is where you're getting a lot of discussion and trends kind of happening here. This is really what's emerging, and this isn't here yet. Okay? Okay. We went out and studied 28 companies that claim that they do artificial intelligence in the world of sales. Okay? And we interviewed each one, and then interviewed their customers, and ended up with 18 that really have something that can be offered in the market today. Okay? And so based on all of this, I want to share some examples. What I'm not going to do is point it to each one of these companies and say, oh, this one does this. We have all this data if you're interested. But I just want to give you a taste of kind of what some of the available technology is available today. Okay? Okay. Here's the deal. So my point earlier is where technology is going to change things is it's going to remove the tedium. So think about that again, right? So all of these examples that I give you earlier, or that I'll give you, are all examples of where technology is trying to reduce the amount of tedium and let the seller be more innovative and creative, okay? Now, we've kind of broken this. There's areas in lead generation, in actual selling and helping you close, and then in post-sales that we'll provide some examples of that. So one thing you have to believe in is that in the future, salespeople, all of your behavior will be stored and captured, okay? Now, there's a lot of privacy rules, and specifically in this region, there's a lot of things to overcome here, but this is going to happen, all right? There's a good example of this about almost a month now ago. Was in Asia meeting with an organization, one of the largest technology companies in the world, everyone would know the brand, and they're developing a sales Fitbit, okay? And, well, they're trying to. And it's the craziest idea. They were talking to us because they wanted to link up learning to what the Fitbit would tell you as a salesperson. So this thing that you would wear syncs up with the calendar, knows when you're supposed to be in meetings, and monitors your health. Hears you talk, understands the speed in which you're talking. Are you asking too many questions? Are you not listening enough? How you're actually responding, how quickly you are, your heart rate, the whole thing, right? And they're trying to develop a Fitbit for sales. I mean, that's crazy, okay? Just to be clear. I had to keep my composure when they were explaining this to me. But that's crazy. But is it a reality? Probably in a few years. I don't know. I mean, this is like the biggest brand in the world trying to do this, so probably. But it just gives you a sense of where this stuff is going and the speed in which it's going. But it's all predicated on the fact that data about, as an individual, how you behave as a salesperson, the transparency is going to be incredible. Just believe it. Now, if you believe in that, some of the technology starts to make sense, okay? Here's one that I thought was really neat. So this one is available today, and kind of like lead scoring for like what a Marketo would do is come in and score leads and that kind of stuff. This thing automatically scores opportunities for you. So you got an opportunity, and then it goes out and figures how real this thing is. All right, goes into unstructured data, goes into all social media sites, it goes all over the web, it figures out, okay, are they really serious about this type of buy or purchase? How positioned are you really to win this? Who do you have working on it? What is their win rate success in this industry? Who are likely competitors? It goes and finds every piece of information about your company, your potential competitors, the company you're going after, and it tells you whether or not you think you're going to win or not. All right? And then specifically the weaknesses and things that you should think about as it relates to whether or not you should go after it. All right? I just think this is an area that's a no-brainer, frankly, in this kind of innovative world where all data becomes publicly available, is this type of stuff will just get better and better and better and better. Now, the idea of why this is AI kind of deep learning is because it specifically gets to know the person. So it gets to know you as an individual who've put this opportunity in, and it, I honestly, between this person and this person may score it differently because of all the different things maybe going on with this person versus this person, or their track record, or whatever it might be. So it gets to actually see more patterns in behavior about the organization, and then evolves itself in terms of how it scores things. Okay? This is here today, and I think it's, again, I think really, really will just be a staple. The other area is in marketing. You can think about sales and marketing, alignment. Like, I don't know, we talked about that maybe 3-4 years ago. Oh, it's really important to align sales and marketing, right? And really what that was, what people were really talking about is, well, at an organizational level, these functions need to be aligned. The messaging out there has to be the same messaging being brought in by the salespeople. And we got to make sure we're saying the same thing. That was kind of the big rage. Well, now, sales and marketing alignment kind of 2.0 is really about, as a rep, in a specific situation, trying to add value in the sales process, to differentiate myself, to educate customers on new things, which we said earlier was important. I need custom content from marketing real time, okay? I don't just need the standard brochure. I need something that inspires my customer, that is very relevant to what they're dealing with. And I need that in the moment, right? So there's a lot of technology out there that does that. That is now kind of a clearinghouse, and it sits there, and you put in, here's my customer situation, connects to CRM, and it actually provides content directly to the rep. Again, they're chasing this idea of adding value in the sales process. Okay. This is stuff that gets a bit crazy, a little bit crazier, where there is, so you know how, when you have meetings, so I'm sure a lot of you now use web-based meetings, right? Like a WebEx or something like that, right? So essentially now you're being, that call and that interaction is over the internet, and there's technology that wraps around it that can actually begin listening to you. Okay, and it can start documenting all of that meeting interaction. So it takes away the fact that you got to sit there and write all the notes. It's actually listening to the call, and it could actually categorize it and break it up into different pieces. You could actually insert an agenda before the call, and then it will follow that agenda and kind of put different content in there. So that takes away some of the administrative burden around the call. But what it also does is gives you advice. So it listens to you and says, hey man, doesn't really say this, but it says, hey, you're asking you're not listening. You're talking too much, okay? You just asked a situation question. What's the actual problem? What are the implications of those problems? Oh, they just threw out an objection. Here's a good answer. So it's an online coach for you right there. And again, it gets to know your pattern. So as it gets to understand kind of the speed in which you talk, how you ask questions, it starts giving you advice real time. And again, think about this. This isn't, on these WebEx calls and on these kind of web-based conferencing systems, it's not crazy to think that you could put some technology around it that actually listens to you and can pattern some results. And if you think about the voice recognition advancements. This is just not, it's not that hard. This exists there today. And here's the other thing that's good about this, looking for the right word, is now after the call, it could send to your leader, to your supervisor, to your sales manager, here's how the call went, that Jim took, or Sally took. And instead of saying the old world, hey, how'd that meeting go? Oh, it was great, got this and that. The person already knows, sales manager knows. Yeah, it sounds like you got this, but we didn't get that action commitment, right? So all of a sudden, precision and the amount of transparency in how you're behaving becomes very open, okay? Again, this is out there today, and I think this is a thing that was just going to get way more amplified. I think this will be something, the sales Fitbit's a bit crazy. This will absolutely be out there in a few years that I think most people will be using. All right, as you set up calls, everything's kind of monitored, real-time coaching for you along the way. Okay, bit scary, but it's there. There's another software solution out there that is now, it's not necessarily about the call and trying to get their needs and all that stuff. It assumes you've done all that. Now it's time to design the solution. So this is more for kind of complex B2B solutions. And it actually helps develop the solution. So it says, hey, listen, based on all the needs, based on the things that we understand, here's the best solution. Here is the ROI for that solution. Here are potential objections that may come up. Here's the PowerPoint presentation that should be presented as a start. And kind of here's the overall package around pricing and all that kind of good stuff. I've seen this thing work. It is, I would say, in the world of Tedium, it probably gets you today about 40% there. So in the sense that it really does, think hard about what you offer, puts pieces together. It's got an archive of all the different things that's done before, pulls in some slides, brings in pricing, thinks about objections. And then as you change and as you make modifications, it learns from that, and then it applies that to the next time it does it. So it's not perfect by any means, but it clearly takes away a lot of the upfront pain and work that sales reps do. Again, more on that kind of solution configuration side. I think this will be an area that will get better. If all the technology out there, I think that sales opportunity qualification is going to come here really, really fast. I think the web-based kind of listening and monitoring and kind of that online coach will get here pretty fast. And I think this in certain industries where there's really complex solution configuration will get here pretty fast. Okay, so what does all this mean in terms of talent? Well, here's one thing. We believe that the traits that are required for salespeople are going to evolve, okay? Again, if you believe in all the tedium kind of going away and that what really matters is the ingenuity in a salesperson, that's where they're spending all their time, then things around analytical thinking, financial analysis and management, systems thinking, business and commercial acumen, that becomes really, really important, all right? It's not just about the EQ anymore. It's about the IQ. And that is going to become much more important as traits and attributes of salespeople, all right? Especially if you believe in the fact that you've got to add value in the sales process, that how you sell becomes the differentiator. That profile of salesperson is just different, all right? What's important today around these influential traits versus kind of analytical traits, if it's a if it's a balance now, a little bit more influential, we think it's going to move much more into analytical traits. These won't go away, of course, but this is what's really going to matter more. And one of the things that we see as a trend here that can back this up is STEM. So science, technology, engineering, and math. There's a 56% increase in salespeople hired with this background. All right, the growth, 56% growth in STEM background in the profession of sales. That's just, is it correlated to the stuff that we talked about earlier? I think so. I mean, STEM, folks with STEM backgrounds work in technology-rich environments easier. They just do. Right? I mean, I am certain that there's no way my dad could have handled a sales Fitbit. Wouldn't have happened. Okay? I am a guaranteeing that. All right? So this is just, again, is it actionable today, this moment for each of you? Probably not. But it's something to think about. It's something to think about the talent, and if you believe that this technology is going to come, if you believe that buyers are getting better at buying faster, to think about, do I have the right people in 5 years from now? And what do I need to be thinking about today? I think this is something that is very real. Okay, here's why it matters, okay? And we thought a lot about this in the sense of, does all this going to make a difference? All this technology is actually going to, is it going to improve performance? Some of you may have seen this before. It's kind of a framework for a lot of our research. We study thousands of organizations a year, and we plot them on this 2x2, okay? Or this matrix. From left to right is how the organizations work from a process perspective. Do their salespeople just go out and randomly sell? Do they have a process, a sales process, but it's not actually followed? Do they have a process that it is followed? And this one is not only do they have a process that's followed, but they adjust because they understand the data coming from that, and their agility is very high. So you get, not a lot of people in random up here, which is how you communicate with your customer. You sell product. You actually sell product, but you know how it impacts your customer, okay? But you're a real product seller. That's how you approach your customer. A solutions consultant is you show up, you ask good questions. So you get their needs, you figure out what you can offer, and you give it to them. That's a solutions consultant. That's where most B2B companies are. And then these two are, you're actually beginning to add value in the process. Strategic contributors, you're adding value in the sales process, you're bringing insights and all that kind of good stuff. To be a trusted partner is you've been doing that for a while, and now you have a seat at the table. You actually are part of the strategic making process in a company. So to have a random process and a trusted partner is very rare. Okay? A good example of that would be a law firm can get to that status, where they actually have a seat at the table, and they're oftentimes kind of a random process. But from a true sales organizations, you kind of randomly see or rarely see that. Okay? Now, of all the companies we studied, 25% are in this category, 48 here, and 27 here. Again, probably not crazy. I mean, that would make sense that the majority of people, to be honest, have an informal process, which means there is a process defined somewhere on a piece of paper, somewhere. But if you had to be honest about every salesperson or everyone selling, do they follow it precisely? Probably not, okay? But they go in and they ask really good questions. That's kind of the heart of where you see most companies. So this isn't, it's not too crazy. Here's the deal, is why this matters is as you go from level 1 to level 3 by the pure numbers, as we've mapped thousands of organizations in here, we then ask them questions about their metrics, their data. And this is the results. So the percent of reps making quota get better as you go from level 1 to level 3. Percent of plan attainment, your win rates, and so on. Okay? That's why this matters, is that the correlation between those two things are significant. Okay? So here's the question. If having a more formal process and adding more value in the sales process is important, because the numbers suggest it is, where does technology and this AI concept, where does this impact things? Well, honestly, it will move you northeast. You will get better and more process. As you take out admin tasks, as a lot of that can be automated, you'll have more formal process. Okay? If you get tools that actually help you add value in the sales process, for example, that one where it gives you marketing collateral, marketing content, real-time customized, you will have a better chance of moving northeast. That is why, and we're studying this right now, we're trying to figure out the amount of money being invested in AI solutions to impact sales. It's crazy, all right? But that's why all this money is getting poured into technology solutions because the thought is it will improve performance. Why? Help you with your process, help you add value in the sales process. That is what's driving the funding. You hear a lot of it today. Didn't talk specifically about like Salesforce's Einstein and how it's plugging into Watson and how those two are working together, but that's a start. I mean, it's a bit contained because Einstein could only work with your opportunity data, but the idea that it plugs into Watson, now it can open up all unstructured data, right? So for an opportunity that you're chasing, it now can plug into everything available, from social sites to everything on the web, to help bring in insights on what you need to do to go win it. Okay, so this stuff is just going to get more and more and more pervasive. But this is why, all right, because there's a belief that it will improve performance. So I'm going to leave you with this, kind of where I started. Please don't forget about the art, because it will always be important. I don't care what anyone says. You'll never be able to automate all of this. But it is really important for all of us to start thinking about how the science of selling will impact the way we think, and specifically the way we execute. And beginning to think about that impact now is what's most important. So I hope this helps. Thank you guys very, very much, and have a great day. Thanks.
Byron, thank you. Wow. Einstein, Watson, all this stuff going on. Pretty powerful stuff, pretty interesting stuff, and it sort of gives an insight where we need to think.